Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your chapter, Caroline,
Thank you
because
for making the time for me to chat. I really appreciate the fact that you're going out of your way to enhance the chapter a little more fully, kind of have a conversation around it. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the questions I was curious about from each of the authors is what was it about the emotional aspects of learning that interested you to become involved in this book?
First, I really liked your description of how you wanted this project to develop, what your hope was for it. And it struck a chord in me because what the topic of your book is focused upon is something that people want to talk about but don't know how to talk about. And you're going into that perhaps unsafe space and making that differentiation. And I thought it was really powerful and I wanted to be a part of your project.
So I'm going to ask you, and we can't go into too much detail because we want people to read the chapter,
Absolutely.
could just at a high level talk about the themes that you explore.
Um, I was looking at it through something called a Carrera method, where it's kind of an auto-ethnographic type methodology, blah, blah, blah. I'm telling a story and framing it as I go through 4 delineated processes, talking about it's kind of past, present, future type framework with a little bit of additional um, delineations in there. And it was mostly around the learning environment and what it looks like for course design and how I wanted to create a learning environment that I perceive to be impactful for the learning process, specifically for the learners, for the students. Um, One thing that I mentioned in the book, just from a framing from an instructional standpoint, any courses that I instruct, I don't call the people in my class as students. I call them learners sometimes, but it's mainly colleagues because I perceive that we're all learning along the way. I get bored easily, in case you haven't noticed yet. I get really bored, and I've actually been nicknamed Squirrel by some people that I get an opportunity to work with. See, don't you get bored easily? I mean, yeah, I'm bored here. I'm done. Let's move on to the next interesting topic, please. And that's how I get bored teaching the same thing every semester, every other semester. So I want to learn from the students just like I'm hoping the students are learning from me. So I'm naturally interested in what they're bringing forward because the assignments, the information, I want to frame the information in ways that are real world, that they're actually using out in the real world. Wenger trainers framework around learning in landscapes of practice is something that I found very powerful. I was doing it, but I didn't recognize that I was doing it. So I reframed it towards learning in landscapes of practice within the courses, so that they're taking the subject matter and the assignments are all around implementing within the real world environment. You have to do something that you have ownership in. What that looks like, the assignment's open-ended enough that you can frame it as you want. We'll talk about it if you need to, but it has to be something that's powerfully important to you in your real world, because it's not only you that's going to see this subject, but our colleagues in the class are going to see it, as well as the concept is you take it out to your coworkers, your supervisors, their bosses, all the way up the food chain, and hopefully make an impact in the organizational structure in whatever you're doing. So over the years, it's been really powerful and it's helped a lot of course colleagues, even if they were one-off colleagues that, oh yeah, I think I want to take this class. It helped them move into higher levels of their professional job environment. People didn't recognize how much they knew. People didn't recognize they were working on their master's degree. People didn't know, they weren't sharing the information. So the assignments were pushing them to share, look, I understand this. This is what I'm creating within our work environment, recognizing that they're protecting the name of the organization and whatever. But it's many case studies that are focused around the subject matter in the course. And it made a significant, I'm going far beyond the book chapter. It made a significant difference in their professional journeys. It moved their careers forward, which to me is impactful. And it made them comfortable enough to try something instead of, well, this is my title, this is my role, I can't go outside of my role. Well, but you're doing it for a class, therefore it's okay. So now let's try it, type thing.
Interesting.
Totally off the wall.
No,
Here we
no,
are.
no, it's wonderful. You made me think because I don't know how people don't know what other chapters are in the book at this point, I'm assuming.
Oh, but I'm so excited to find out.
Okay, so one of the things I did was I interviewed 4 learners. So 4 adults to talk about their personal experiences of learning as kids and then now as adults and how it's influenced them and what they prioritize in their learning, because we don't usually hear from the learners in this kind of
Right.
context. And so their stories are very personal stories. And you mentioned the Carrere autoethnographic approach. Yours is the most personal of the academic chapters. We got the 4 learners, but yours is it has similar feel to it in a way. How did it feel to share your personal story in this chapter?
Really uncomfortable. It's as I know you've had to go through all these things as well, but as academics, we shut down our personal side because, the limitations and the impact upon whatever research you're doing is significant. So it'll degrade whatever research you're doing if you enhance it with your personal beliefs and all that kind of stuff. Which is why I happen to like qualitative research versus quantitative. Um, it's an understood that, yeah, you do have a personal viewpoint and lens through which you're viewing the world, but from an ethnographic standpoint, when I'm talking about myself, I'm much more comfortable. Well, I try to be much more comfortable sharing my own stories because I imagine it's going to help someone else down the road. And I find with people that I run by, whether it's colleagues from other universities or people in training and talent development realms, when we start sharing our stories, it becomes much more binding. We're bound within an understanding, and it's not just, oh, well, you're the contract person. It becomes much more of a narrative type storytelling environment where we're all trying to get to the same outcome. Let's try and work together. This is who I am. I'm being transparent who I am. Let's try and move it forward instead of a robot type person. And at, that's one of the reasons I enjoy qualitative research, is because it's much more personal. And I got into primarily qualitative because the stuff I call it junk, the junk that I do, isn't really understood yet. It's not framed enough to go into a quantitative bean counting type understanding. The stuff I like doing is much more on the edge of, we're not really sure what we're doing. Let's try and figure out what this is. That's kind of where my little squirrel brain goes to. It's like, oh, that's interesting. So what's happening here? Okay, nobody else has published on this. Oh, I found a gap in the literature. Oh, let's play with this for a while. Okay, now I'm bored. Move on.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that personally and professionally, actually.
And that's the best thing about being a consultant is, okay, now I'm done here. Now I get to go play over here, something totally new and different, and figure it out.
No, I move on to new shiny things all the time. That's all.
Exactly. New shiny toys.
Exactly. My last question is about what you see as the practical applications of the themes or content you covered in your chapter. How can you see readers applying what they gain from your chapter?
I'm hopeful because, as you're well aware, for trainers, teachers, we instruct the way that we've been taught until we know anything different, until we're pushed outside of our comfort zone or it's just not working for us anymore. And I'm hopeful that this may just be a first pass to think about teaching and learning in new and different ways, but just having a different understanding of, oh, people do things differently. Maybe I'm not reaching my student as from a performance improvement standpoint. Maybe I'm not reaching my students, my learners, my attendees as well as I'd want to. How could I change that up a little bit? And that's happening. I think it's happening in academia, all the way from K-12 through doctoral studies. I think there's a really interesting shift going on, but I also think there's a really interesting shift going on in training and talent development in organizations and military, all those realms as well. And it's kind of earth-shaking, potentially earth-shattering differentiations. And the old guard are not necessarily comfortable with changing from the talking head into an engaged attendee, an engaged trainee, an engaged learner, colleague, whatever you want to call the person. Allowing more control of the information on the side of the person who's learning the information versus the talking head, I know everything, power and control. I find it wildly interesting, and especially within the economic world and the things that are going on culturally, socially. All these things are happening at the same time. I think it's just wild. So why not try and offer differentiated ways of thinking about things?
That was brilliant. Thank you.
Deep.
Thank you, Caroline. That was great. No, I really appreciate everything you shared today. Thank you.
This book is going to make a huge difference. I think I truly believe this book is going to make a huge difference. You're bringing forward a lot that will positively impact. I'm hopeful. But yeah, we.
Because I didn't write anything in it, so I can't
But
really.
you're bringing it forward. You're pulling it together.
Go team, go team.